Welcome everyone to this video on waterfall displays in amateur radio. One of the best things which I have seen in amateur radios when I returned back to ham radio after a gap of about 1.5 decades was the waterfall display. It is a really splendid display seen on your screens. Moreover, I use an external monitor in my FT710 radio to see it in a bigger screen. It's a large monitor which I have in my shack, which is kept near the radio as well as near my computer and other setup where I work most of the time whenever I am inside the office room. So my advantage is that unlike in old analog radios, these new software defined radios have a wonderful waterfall display which you can constantly monitor from a distance, especially if you have the large screen display. So what I do is I keep working in my computer while the external monitor of my radio displays the waterfall of a particular band. Early morning when I wake up, I usually monitor 20-meter band because I expect activity on that band only at 20 meter at that. And when a little more time passes, I know that the pre-Belgaum net starts on 7050. So I move on to 40-meter band. And as day progresses, I switch to 21 megahertz because you know that 21 megahertz or 15-meter band opens up usually during the daily hours. And still later, I move on to 10-meter band. In my region, what I found is that afternoons, 10-meter band is best in the current time when the solar activity is very good. 10 meter gives me a good bit of DX, and noise level is also low on 10 meter. So this is why I monitor the waterfall display continuously whenever I am near my radio, but need not be that I am sitting in front of the radio because I can see the monitor at a distance. Currently I am at about 2 feet or even 3 feet away from the radio. Still I can see the signals very well on the waterfall display. Now, why is this display called a waterfall display? You can compare it with a natural waterfall in which water falls from the top of the hill or whatever is the upper part and it falls down in a stream down. That is what you see as a waterfall, either on a dam or a natural waterfall somewhere in the forest. You see water falling from a height downwards. This is exactly like what you see in the waterfall display. On a given frequency, at the current moment, there will be signal at the top of the display. And as time passes, the signal moves down. So whatever you are seeing at the top of the display is the current one, and what you are seeing at the bottom is something which occurred a few seconds before, depending on the speed of the waterfall which you have set up. If you set up the waterfall speed very fast, then it may not span very long. But if you keep it slow, you can know what happened on that frequency a moment or a few seconds back also. That is by setting the speed of the waterfall. In the natural waterfall, you do not have an option to set the speed of the waterfall. If you want to see it in slow motion, you have to record it and replay at a different speed. That's the only way. Each signal on the waterfall display represents activity on a given frequency. For example, if you go to the lower end of the 40-meter band, or for that matter, any band, lower end of bands are meant for CW or continuous wave activity. You will see thin waterfalls of CW signals because they occupy very little bandwidth. And as you move up, usually on frequencies ending with 7.4, that is the frequency of the digital activity. FT8 signals that can be seen on most bands when they are open on say 7074 or 21074. In that region, you will see activity of the FT8 or digital signals. That will be a continuous signal, while the CW signal will be broken signals depending on the DITs and DAS. And what I have noticed is that the digital signals are slightly broader than the CW signals, occupying a little more bandwidth. And I have not operated digitally, so I do not know what exactly is going on that frequency. From the nature of the signal and the fact that I know 074 is usually the region for digital activity on most bands, except on contest days. On contest days, I have seen differences. CW activity can seen higher up on the band. Similarly, digital signals can also occur higher up on the band. And sometimes on any frequency, these signals can come. It all depends on which frequency the operator decides to operate. So that's about CW and usual digital signals on the lower part of the band. When you move up, what you see is that you can see the SSB signals. And suppose you know the net frequency. For example, in our region, 7050 kilohertz is the region for very popular Belgaum net. It starts at 7 a.m. local time. And we have a pre-Belgaum roundtable on that frequency with a lot of stations from different parts of VU land coming up on frequency. Occasionally, we have DX stations also coming up. And that is what we call as pre-Belgaum roundtable, which I am very fond of. I usually participate. Most of the days, the activity is good only after 6:30 a.m. local time. But occasionally, I have seen activity on that frequency at even 5:30 a.m. So it is for the early bird. You can have some RACTU-like of activity with your friends throughout the country. And sometimes distant stations also appear. And as you are aware, earlier in the morning, because of the ionospheric conditions, you get longer skip distance, and I hear more distant stations. For example, I'm in South India. I hear North Indian stations earlier in the morning, which go down in signal strength later on. And as the sun rises and activity in the ionosphere is more, I hear only nearby, mostly neighboring states only on that frequency later on. So this is the waterfall display on 7050 kilohertz. And if you move to 7080, there is another very popular net in this region, which is known as Charminar net, which usually starts about 7:20 a.m. local time. So these are the SSB signals. SSB signals can be recognized by a thicker display on the waterfall than the CW signals. And difference is that the intensity of the signal depends on the signal strength also. You have an S meter on the top which displays the signal strength. More than that, if you see the signal, that is the intensity of the color of the waterfall display of a particular signal, you can understand how strong it is even without looking at the S meter. A signal which is 5.9 plus 20 dB will have a very thick, dense band on the waterfall, while a 5.5 signal will be hardly visible. Of course, in monitoring waterfall alone for signals, there is a caveat. That is, you may not pick up very weak signals on the waterfall display, especially the weak DX signals may not be seen on the waterfall. It also depends somewhat on the settings, the sensitivity settings of your waterfall. If you have kept the waterfall very sensitive, you might pick weaker signals also. But for me, with a limited setup of a 100-watt wire, which I call, there is a wire antenna and only 100-watt radio without any linear, what I found is that I can only work signals which I see well on the waterfall. If I tune in and find out, for example, there are sites like dxwatch.com. If you go to dxwatch.com, you can find out where the stations are operating. Others would have spotted it and mentioned. And if I pick a very weak signal, it is quite unlikely that I'll be able to work that station. I'll keep calling, nothing will be heard. they will not hear me. So what I found practically is that if I use the waterfall display and call the stations I am seeing well, then most often I get a reply. Of course, there is a problem. The other station may be using a beam antenna and high power in the low range. For example, US, the power limit is only even up to 1.5 kilowatt. So it may be that I may not get through. But usually what happens is that if the other end is powerful with a good antenna, then they will also hear me better than what I hear them. Unless if they are using a beam antenna and a low power station, then it is different. Otherwise, most of the stations from DX which I hear with my limited setup, because my antenna is not very high and my radio is an ordinary 100-watt radio, I'll be hearing only the good signals from DX land. And the noise level, background noise also is high here. So weak stations, I find it very difficult to hear. So this is how I operate. I find out the signals, good signals on the waterfall display, and try calling them when there is a pause. If it's a local QSO, I'll just break in when there is a pause. Or if it's a DX, I'll keep on waiting, find their call signs, and when one person is signing off from the other, I'll just give a call to the station which is signing off. That's how I work DX. I'm not a very highly successful DX operator with this limited setup, but this is how I find it interesting for my hobby. Now, suppose you don't have a new radio with a waterfall display as I have. I am having a new radio only because this is my first ever HF radio, commercial HF radio. I did have a homebrew radio long back, decades back, when I used to have a BC radio, that is a Philips home radio as the receiver, and a homebrew. Initially we used to VW and QRP 5 watts, and later I could homebrew 120 watt 3x807 TX. But those are long away. In those days I have not heard of waterfall, and there was no waterfall display also in the radios which I have seen also. So now suppose you are having an old radio, what will you do to monitor the waterfall? That's an important question which I come across when I talk to some of my ham friends, either over the radio or on phone sometimes. You can choose one of the two options which I am aware of. One is very simple, not at all expensive. You can look for web SDRs, that is software defined radios connected to the internet, which you can tune individually. A particular software defined radio may be having so many portals, so that people can tune it from different parts of the world to different frequencies. That is what we call as a web SDR. We have one at Calicut, courtesy VU3 Whiskey Echo Whiskey. That is the software defined web SDR in my region, that is Kozhikode or Calicut. You have the web address, and then you can find it either in your mobile phone. Android phone, it's easy. I'm not sure about the iPhones because I do not have an iPhone. And you can also find it out in your laptop or a computer. You can have the screen displayed, and there is provision to choose the band frequency. Frequency, you can either move the cursor and find the frequency, or you can type in, there is a spot for typing in the frequency, and you can monitor the web SDR. Suppose I am monitoring the web SDR of my region, most likely those signals which are seen on that web SDR will be accessible for me from my radio as well. So those who are not having a waterfall display in their radio, if they want to monitor the band continuously without having to tune from one frequency to another to find out a signal, you can always monitor the web SDR of the region nearest to you in your mobile phone or in your computer, and go and try to contact that station when you see a good signal on the waterfall. I usually do not go to this approach because I already have the radio with a waterfall display. So this is option number 1 for those without a waterfall display on the radio, especially all the older hams who are being active and do not want to spend a fortune on getting a new radio. Then the second option is that there are SDR, software defined radio dongles, available. Those are small devices which can be pinned into the USB port of your computer or laptop. And there will be different types of SDR softwares are also available, and that you can install in the computer. And the antenna can be connected to the SDR dongle so that the signals will be picked up. It will all depend on the sensitivity of the antenna also. And once you can either use a vertical with a omnidirectional pattern of pickup, or you can use more, if you want to be more sensitive, you can use specific antennas also. Or you can disconnect the antenna of your radio and connect it to the SDR dongle. SDR dongle is a very small device which can be attached to the USB port of your computer. And if you switch on the software, the waterfall display of the SDR can be used in a similar way as the waterfall display on your radio. I have seen several hams posting on qrz.com how they monitor the band exactly in a similar way as I do. And there's an advantage that when you're working on the computer, especially if you have a dual screen monitoring facility in the computer, then you can monitor the band on one monitor and do your work in the other monitor. So you can pick up signals, and when you see the signal, you can go onto the radio and find out that station and try to work it. In my region, other than the very local station, there are other web SDRs like Coimbatore web SDR or Kovai, and there is one at Bangalore. These are a few hundred kilometers, nearly a few hundred kilometers from here. Still, most of the propagations will be similar on those web SDRs. Best one would be to use RTL SDR dongle or some other SDR dongle in your location itself, so that you are sure that whatever signal you are hearing in the SDR dongle, you will be able to hear on your radio also. Because if you are looking at a distant web SDR, propagation may be different in your region and that region, and you may not see a signal which you see on that region in your radio. That is a caveat of using web SDR. So if you are using RTL SDR or a similar SDR dongle, that problem is also rectified. And these dongles are available at a fraction of a cost of a new commercial radio. So all those who have old commercial radios can choose one of these two options for monitoring the band continuously. Another advantage for these two options, that is web SDR and the RTL SDR or similar SDR dongles, is that you can switch between bands using the mouse click. You don't have to go to the radio and switch the band each time. You can just from your table itself, you can use the mouse to change the band. Of course, my radio also has the facility to change band using my mouse control, but then that's a different mouse other than my computer mouse. So I have to use that mouse and look at that screen and change the band. That is possible for me to type in the frequency on the radio and get to a different band. That is because I have cat control facility in my radio. All I need is a cable to connect the mouse to the back of the radio, which I do have. So this is in short about waterfall displays and how you can use it optimally to work a lot of stations, especially good DX, when you don't have to keep on tuning the radio. That's the most important advantage I have found. You don't have to keep on tuning the radio to find stations. Caveat is, as I have mentioned, you can go for the weak stations, and that is unlikely to be successful also for a limited setup.